Thanks very much for coming this afternoon to the last of the budget forums for 2019 spring. As always, just a reminder that this is being recorded so that our colleagues up in Saskatoon and elsewhere can watch. And so it's archived on the budget update page. There's now probably God knows how many hours of archived budget presentations, and apparently they're really good at putting people to sleep if you're having trouble. A reminder too that if you've got a question at the end, if you would go to the microphone there so that viewers can hear you off campus. And you just introduce yourself and maybe say what department or unit you're from, ask your question, and we'll do the best we can to answer that question. So here's a quick outline of what we intend to do today. We'll go quickly through the provincial support. We want to talk to you a little bit about a pilot that we're trying out with our partners at CCE, working with the faculties. We'll give you some highlights on the budget and a quick overview of tuition and scholarship assistance. Then we'll move to the academic positions, beginning with what CCB recommended and what the decisions were following those recommendations. A quick scan of budget dollar per weighted full load equivalent student by faculty. How many resources are going in to the faculties? And then Dave will take the research funding decisions and the administrative requests, and we'll look briefly at a sample of the detail in the budget letter. The budget letter, as always, is available on the budget update page, right down near the bottom. Front page looks like this, and we're just going to take you through a bit of detail on the back tables that really show you where the investments are going bit by bit by bit. So that's a quick overview of what we're going to do. Over to you, Dave.
Good. Tom used to do this slide, but that was back when it was bad news. Now that it's generally better news and things like that, now I get to do it. First, there's actually one line that we could have put there at the very top, but I think everyone knows that in the provincial grant, allocations to all public or post-secondary sectors was zero, so we didn't bother putting that in. But we've actually got a good news bit in that from the government through the Saskatchewan University's funding model, a whole bunch of different inputs there, mainly enrollment, research activity, and other things. We've actually got a shift from U of S down to U of R of 1.92 million. So that's it gets included in our, and that's what this slide is trying to tell you. What changed from year to year in terms of how much money have we got to take and work with. So we've got a positive 1.92 million that comes from your good work in terms of increasing enrollments and activity levels in all parts of the university. The zero shows up in the next line as well for the preventive maintenance and renewal. So that capital funding used to be called sustaining capital. That number hasn't changed for about a decade. You say 5 years? Feels like a decade. So it's at just over 5 million, and so provides a bit of a challenge in terms of inflation, particularly in that sector, has increased quite a bit over that time. Two red numbers up there. One was predicted. I'll do the $100,000 first. For the past 3 years now, the provincial government forecast that and said, look, we're going to stop the allocation of the funding to the Mackenzie Art Gallery. It flowed through the university, so they are not paying it to us anymore. We are still paying it to the Mackenzie Art Gallery. So that's a $100,000 hit to us. It's a reduction from the government of $100,000 a year. It's in the third of 4 years. It used to be $400,000. So we'll see that again next year. The other one was a bit of a surprise, but it's just a change in how the Saskatchewan Advantage Scholarship will be supported. So for individual students, it used to be, this was the $500 per student that all Saskatchewan-based high school graduates coming would get a $500 grant. It now is being administered rather than through the universities. It'll be administered by the province and the Canada Loans structure and more of a needs-based thing. So we won't see it at all, so it's a net bottom line impact to us. For the students, they'll be applying and it'll be handled directly by the government. Tom will talk a little bit more about scholarships later on because there's a small incremental addition that we'll be having, and we can take questions if you got any questions on any of these things later on as well. The bottom bit, 3 really good news items in terms of operating grant increases Each one of these is base budget dollars. And that's what's so important, because that's the stuff that takes and reoccurs. So 3.1 million that we have to start off this year that comes just from the enrollment and tuition increases from last year. You may recall in last year's budget, we forecast that we'd have a 1% increase in enrollment. So we took that money and pre-invested it in last year's budget, but our experience was quite a bit higher. Over 3% in terms of enrollment growth, much of it coming as international. What that translates to is an additional $3.1 million in allocation that we can then use to pay off the activities at the university. Two other ones that have come from budget decisions from this budget is, first of all, $1.9 million from a tuition increase. You would have heard after the budget and things that the tuition increase this year was approved at 2.8%. So that 2.8% tuition increase translated against the level of enrollment that we expected, the increases from last year, and new ones this year translates to 1.9. And we're also budgeting excuse me, for another increase this year, being a little bit less conservative. So we're saying we're stretching a little bit to be able to make some more investments. We're saying that enrollment next year will increase by 1.5%. And so that generates another 1.2 million, which again is invested. So we've got a series of different positive investments that help us take and make this year's budget.
So CCE, as you know, works in partnership with the faculties to develop off-peak course delivery. I think everybody's familiar with that, as well as their own business lines in English as a second language, lifelong learning, the conservative music, and so on. CCE has been doing an incredible job. That's Harvey and his team, working with the faculties in generating revenue for the university. And if you just look at that number, the total revenue target, the total target for return to the center, $16.98 million. That's up $4.3 million in 1 year from CCE. Without the job that CCE, in partnership with the faculties, is doing, we would be in a very different financial position. And of course, they're also paying the mortgage costs for the renewal of the College Avenue campus at $1 million a year. That's unchanged. What that has done is to generate a lot of what we call soft money, unassigned, one-time money in carry forwards around campus. And that's risky. Soft money is not something you can base budget against. It's not something that you can make a permanent commitment against. So you can't hire a tenure track person or a permanent staff member. And in times of fiscal challenge, governments get very interested in carry forwards at universities. A couple of years ago, if you remember, we had a mid-year clawback from government, and Saskatoon had an even larger one. So what we tried to do with this pilot is to protect a little bit more of that carry forward by saying to the faculties, which of you would care to convert some of this into base budget? And it was a model developed by Financial Services in Lamont. So we have 4 faculties piloting this now. Arts at 266, business at 195, kin at 110, and nursing is just starting. The nursing budget, the carry forward is small, but will grow. But what that has meant is that these faculties now have the ability to base budget that money, to hire permanently against it. Arts has indicated that they will do 2 or 3 additional tenure track recruitments, so that's above what we will show you later on, authorized in the budget. Business has already said they're going to go ahead and have been given authorization to recruit into a tenure track position in business. And kin is still making up its mind what it's going to do with that money. I anticipate it will be a full-time position. So we moved nearly $600K into the base in 4 faculties, largely because of the success of the partnership between CCE and the line faculties. We're going to look at it again next year, see how this pilot has turned out, learn some lessons from it, and decide whether it will be extended to other faculties.
A couple of highlights and things like that. The good news again, I think 25th year in a row in terms of the operating budget balanced. The reason it's balanced is because that's one of our key goals and key directions and principles. The really good news this year, and the first year in quite some time, there are no cuts. No unit has experienced any cut. A bit of, huge, almost magical considering where we started this year and where we thought we'd end up being. And throughout that, though, a number of different increases in a variety of different areas, which are all listed here. The most important and largest and our biggest challenge overall, always, is just funding the current salary envelope to keep all of us that are here funded with the normal salary increases, cost of living, economic, merit, career growth, progression, et cetera. And that amounts to $5.17 million. So if you start adding up those numbers from the previous slide in terms of what we've got to invest, always our biggest investment is just maintaining the status quo with growth. But this budget also invests in a number of different areas. As you'll see in a couple minutes, there's new faculty positions, there's positions in student and administrative support, graduate scholarships, library acquisitions, and of course the other fairly big bit of news in this budget, of course, people always wonder particularly the students, what's the tuition increase? So as mentioned before, 2.8%. We've put some other provincial data and such that's not uncommon. In fact, most other places are increasing at a faster rate than us.
So just a quick tuition overview. I think most people in the room are roughly aware of what students at the University of Regina pay. But if you look at the rightmost column, what it tells you is that a student taking a full course load of 5 courses in a given term in arts, domestic pays $3,356. In business, $3,919, with that differential between the two faculties. And those are the bottom tuition and the top tuition at the university. For undergraduates, we're now looking at between $10,000 and $11,700 in tuition per term, or over the course of a 4-year degree, well, you can do the math. On the graduate side, we remain among the lowest tuition in the country on the graduate side. We have put graduate tuition up in most cases by 2.8%, and you may remember the discussion at the last forum. But what we've done is to produce new scholarship money that will offset that. And I'll come to that in a minute. Oh, there it is. We've increased student financial assistance by $190,000, and you'll see a graph in a moment that indicates where we are in comparison to the comprehensive universities throughout the country and the amount of financial aid we provide to students. The $50K in new scholarships for thesis-based master's and doctoral students completely offsets their tuition increase. Now that scholarship money is not available for non-thesis, non-research students, so it's not available for the students in the professional programs like the MHA or the MBA and so on. It's just for research students. Tanya, if you have a question, could you, so people can hear you off campus, or off this campus, go to the microphone?
Does that include international students?
To whom who are eligible for this?
Yeah, so I mean the issue with the graduate tuition is that when it was initially devised, according to other universities, it didn't take into account that those other universities had significant scholarships, and in most cases, especially in science, those were completely waived. Those tuition fees were completely waived, and so we have international students who are paying absurd amounts of tuition, and I'm just curious, how is that going to be allocated? How is it applied for? How is it going to be implemented? Or is it just across the board debit or credit to their tuition? How does that work?
Okay, maybe we could go back to the previous slide on tuition. If you see, students at the master's and doctoral level pay the same tuition as domestics, except they pay that international fee, which is about $1,100 per term. But other than that, the tuition structures for domestic and visa students at the graduate level are identical.
Right. So, but I'm saying graduate tuition in general, when it was devised at our university, because I remember talking to Rod about it, it was based on other universities. But again, it didn't account for the fact that most faculties or schools gave tuition waivers. And so it's a big issue here with our grad students.
We've calculated it, and I believe it's available to all, correct? I'm looking at Lamont to help me out here, all students, domestic or visa. And we've calculated it to offset almost precisely the increase, that 2.8%.
So that'll just be credited to them, or how does
I'm not sure how the mechanism will work, but it will be applied some way to them, either up front or by some mechanism. I don't have that level of detail.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Now, if you look there, Memorial's an outlier. because tuition at Memorial is quite low, although that's changing with the oil situation in Newfoundland. But the University of Regina, among the Canadian comprehensives, is at 31% of the total, as a percentage of tuition and fee revenue that we return to students. So if we take in a total of $70 million in tuition and fees, again, you can do the math and the amount that we return to students in scholarships and financial supports. Now, Dave mentioned that the province has introduced a big change in the way that they're handling the SAS. That means that $3.x million will disappear from our budget, but it also means we're not allocating out that $3.x million for SAS. We feel that even with that change, next year we will remain where we are here because the gap between us and the next institution, Waterloo at 24%, is sufficiently large that our positions should not be changed there. We'd like to do more. We're proud of what we're doing there. And we've got University of Saskatchewan in there, not because it's a comprehensive, but what you can see a much better funded university in terms of its endowment incomes particularly can do. They're only 2% ahead of us. We don't have nearly as rich or lengthy an endowment as the University of Saskatchewan does, and therefore don't have the same money to give away. But we think we're doing pretty well, and we're going to continue to try to do better. Very quickly, this is CCB's ranking of the academic requests. If you recall from the previous forum, there were requests for more than 60 positions across campus, both academic and non-academic. And CCB, under the leadership of Monica Choulet, the chair of that committee, worked incredibly hard to make recommendations and rankings. And we have essentially followed most of those recommendations as we've done in previous years because the advice is very good. It's what most of us would do. So those are the rankings, and they include a $100,000 increase to the library acquisitions. Dave, you could just flip it. Here's what's actually coming. These are the decisions as approved by the board last week. So we have a new professor in Biochem. Tanya, you should be happy about that one. We have a new professor in nursing with a particular focus on Indigenous nursing, given the needs in this province. We've got a lab instructor in engineering, given the teaching needs there. Seen tremendous growth in ESL, particularly with a contract that Harvey's running right now with Japan and Japanese students. So we've authorized another base budgeted ESL instructor. Arts has authorization now to recruit into anthropology and English. I need to stress, to be absolutely clear, that's not new money. That's money that's in the faculty, but sufficiently secure that we're confident in saying, go ahead and recruit into those two areas. Business, again from the CCE fee sharing, is going to recruit another assistant professor. And if KIN, and maybe Arts feels even more willing to take some of that CCE money, there may be authorizations to recruit still more tenure track positions. And by the way, these positions would normally take effect in, where are we now, 2019? The 1st of July 2020, but the money goes immediately into the faculty budgets in the new fiscal year, so they have that money to spend on things like recruitment expenses, startup expenses, those kinds of things, for people who will come onto payroll on the 1st of July. And in the e-recruit system, this isn't on the slide, but in the e-recruit system this morning, there are currently 16 faculty positions under recruitment, 10 tenure track and 6 term, up to 4-year terms. Academic supports, lab technicians for both engineering and science, the need to ensure that those labs are safe and instructors get good support from lab technicians to ensure lab safety. An admission specialist for FGSR, where the volume of applications is increased by, how much? In 1 year? 32% increase in applications in 1 year. Over 3 to 4 years, it's probably tripled, right? And Saudi is one of the ones who does that kind of thing. So you've got a new position to help you out. And an academic advisor in science, where right now the ratio, Doug, is about 1 advisor for every 700 students, so we had to do something there. JSGS also wanted an academic advisor. We weren't able to fund it this year. We'll come back and look at it again next year if it's re-requested. And finally, QP support in social work. That's a frontline position at the Saskatoon campus, where we've got as many social work students there as we do have social work students in Regina. Academic funding, outside positions, $76K to help cope with growth in kinesiology, which is up about 25% in the last few years. We're putting about $250,000 into the Center for Teaching and Learning, about just dropping down $155K into the central testing facility. That's very modest, and we may have to top that up depending on levels of activity. But you would have heard, if you were at Executive of Council 2 weeks ago, one of the associate deans in the big faculty saying, this thing cannot come soon enough. We are not able to cope with the number and kind of accommodations that are being sought by students. And we'll begin to address that. The Central Transfer Credit Unit, what that means is if a student comes in from, let's say, Athabasca and has some courses for which they've been granted credit, we need to evaluate whether those courses transfer for credit at the University of Regina. What we found is that we're not very good at it, and we're slow at doing it. And what happens then is that students tend to go elsewhere because they don't get a timely response to their request to have their transfer credit evaluated. So we're going to fund a little unit in the registrar's office, initially I think it's 2 people, to work that and work in partnership with the faculties to speed that up. What that will eventually become is self-supporting and then money-making through the fees charged for transfer credit evaluation and the letters of permission that are issued. About 5 years ago, we started putting $200K a year into science and $200K a year into engineering because the teaching equipment in those faculties was getting so old that it dated back to, we joke, it dated back to the Civil War, but to the days when this was the University of Saskatchewan Regina campus. There were still those stickers on some of the microscopes. So over the years, both engineering and science have each received $1 million in additional funding, and we're continuing that $200K each this year. And we're putting about $600K into international recruitment support. International students are vital to us, and if you want to put that in context, right now of the roughly $90 million in total tuition and fee revenue for the university, international students account for about $30 million of it. So again, that's a very small fraction of what they bring to us. And there we are with net faculty academic expenditures. We won't spend a lot of time on this except to note, question came up at another meeting this morning. Those figures do not include benefits. And for benefits, you've got to add about 15% cash. So in the budget letter, the numbers for the faculties include benefits. These don't include benefits. But to take a couple of examples, arts has remained basically stable, more or less, over the years. But if you look at kin, which has grown from 2.2 to 4.2, or engineering, which has gone from 5.0 to 8.8 million, again, in an attempt gradually to allocate resources into areas of real growth on campus.
Good. Some of the things in research, a long list here. Some smaller investments, but very significant. The first 2 are simply long-standing commitments, as you can see. In one case, the 4th year of a 5-year program or 5-year commitment. The other one, the 2nd year of a 2-year commitment. Some new investments are with the growth, and you've probably seen the celebrations for the many, many research contracts and awards that have been won. So the research office needs some help. So a business analyst, in part to help with those projects that are already ongoing, but also to help the principal investigators and such write the business cases to be able to take and secure future research as well. So both a business analyst and also administrative support for those research institutes. So some good investments there. $50,000 just in general for the VP research to help with different initiatives. You've probably seen throughout the year a variety of different times where the office has offered or given out competitions for different people, small little grants, typically $10,000 to take and help someone with their research initiatives. So felt that it was important to put a little bit more money in there to do even more of that to help lever bigger successes. Tom already talked about the $50,000 additional in scholarship funding and $50,000 top-up for undergraduate research fellowships. That one is a one-time funding. And then 2 that we're actually particularly proud of. You may have heard an announcement, I think it was just on Friday, with respect to the university through Kathy McNutt, leadership, and indeed Vianne's engagement as well, that we were one of, I think, 14 universities out of 94 who got the major grant funding to take and help universities develop a template for equity, diversity, and inclusion. So there's a variety of different activities. Anita Swan is one of them, but this is to help move that initiative forward and us providing a leadership role So the $45,000 is our contribution to this $400,000 grant award. And similarly, another $15,000 just to recognize that if we want to play in the world of Canada Research Chairs, one of the new obligations is that every committee member on those committees must undergo training on unconscious bias. So we want to make sure that we can be playing in that game, and so therefore we're setting up a training program to make sure that we meet that obligation. Some of the administrative requests, I'll just let you read that. Of course, this was CCB's due diligence. They did incredible work this year to take and attend all of the budget presentations and review the huge binder of materials, set down over a series of meetings in different subcommittees, took and ranked them, and provided that advice for administrative positions as well. There's a couple of areas that just got a little bit too technical for them, and they deferred those decisions. So facilities management and external relations in particular deferred those requests to the administration. So this is what it then translated to. And if we flip back and forth, you'd recognize that many of these are exactly what the recommendation was from CCB. In particular, notice a few different areas, the IS area and the FM areas, recognize that we've got a whole new world up at the College Avenue campus. We've got some incredible facilities. So went from an underpopulated location to one that is high intensity, and with it some of our best teaching spaces, most sophisticated learning and IT capable places anywhere on the campus. And so to be able to take and service that, we need the staff. So obviously some AV support, and on the facilities side, cleaners, maintenance people, etc. I want to talk about the FM one. There's also a major change in the regulatory oversight from the city, who said they're going to start enforcing the National Building or National Fire Code, which specifies that every device needs to be inspected and certified annually. So that means if you look up sprinkler heads, control boxes, fire alarms, etc., more than 10,000 of them around the campus need to be checked. With that new regulatory requirement, just need more staff, otherwise they can close us down. And much of that exists through a number of different areas in terms of regulatory requirements in the human resources side and financial services, etc. And so there's some minor growth in a variety of those different areas. A few more positions, and these are all the base budget positions, but external relations was operating on soft funded money for many years as an example. And so we finally base budgeted a few of those. And you'll notice in the one-time allocations in the budget letters and things, there's still some positions that we're having to fund on a one-time basis. So we're coming toward the end. On that page for the budget letter, which is accessible through the main university webpage, you have all of the historic budget letters. You can look at the investments, detail, faculty by faculty for the last however many years. If we just, Dave, flip to the next one. Wanted to give you just a couple of examples from the actual budget letter. And I'm just going to start with, let's take a look at arts. So this actually now includes the cost of benefits at $16.854 million. There's no money assigned to the new tenure track positions in English and anthropology because, as we said, the money's already in the faculty. The positions are in the faculty, but they've been authorized to go ahead and recruit into those lines. The big expense in arts, as Dave was saying earlier, is $661,000. Those are the salary and benefit increases for the existing complement of faculty and staff in arts. So this is where most of the money is going. And if you total it up, it's cut off on this screen grab. The total increase in salary and benefits for the academic and academic-facing units is $4.24 million, and the campus as a whole is $5.173 million in salary and benefit increases. Maybe just one other example there. So if you look at engineering, reinvestments and cost increases are associated with the lab instructor that we told you about and the QP technician for lab safety, plus another $381,000 to cover salary expenses, so you can see where engineering winds up. And all of that detail
is outlined in this letter, going back years if you want to go through it. So I think that's about it. Thank you so much for coming, and we'll do our best to answer any questions that you might have. I want to conclude by thanking everybody who is part of the budget-making process, from those who submit the requests, the AVPs, the deans, the directors, to the members of the budget advisors, and certainly CCB, which did just an incredible amount of work going through those, sitting through, what was the count of budget presentations? 25, 26, something like that? Mm-hmm. And then ranking them and giving that advice to us, most of which we've followed very, very closely. So that concludes the presentation. We're happy to answer any questions you might have. And again, if you could come to the microphone, tell us who you are, we'll do our best.
And we can flip back to any slide if there's a particular slide that you had a question on, or it helps.
I feel it's my role to ask the hard questions. So I'm just curious, how does, there's a new position that was just announced, and Associate VP Teaching and Student Analytics. And I just wondered where that fits in, or if that was that a new position?
So
or is that replacing someone?
That is a repurposing of an existing position. So I'll explain it to you, Tanya. It's a good question. I think nearly everybody in the room knows Brian Christie. Most of you will know Brian has elected to retire this summer in July after many years at the university. So what we've done is taken that existing position and repurpose it into an AVP to whom the Center for Teaching and Learning and what we now call the Office of Resource Planning reports. So it will have two reporting lines. We're reconceiving the Office of Resource Planning to make it much more student-focused. And the idea is to meld effectively the student data gathering, student survey data, and so on, to improve teaching and learning through that position and those reporting lines. So it's not a new position, it's a repurposing of an existing one.
Okay. I just was curious because I know that in many conversations with Vian that there was, I think, general idea that there were probably too many positions with higher positions in admin with fewer people reporting to them, and my understanding was that those were going to be dealt with through attrition, and so I was just really surprised to see this new position pop up.
Again, the choice was made to staff that with a new configuration that we really hope will drive student success by bringing together data gathering and survey results with teaching and learning.
Okay. The other thing I wondered, you often show line faculties increases in salaries and benefits, and I'm just wondering how that compares with President's Office.
Sure.
For instance.
It's in the detail in the budget letter. I'll give you the figure. In the executive offices, the budgeted salary increase for next year for all the staff, so that's not just us, but all of the support staff and so on, is $83,997. Okay.
And so that same level of detail, that was a sample page of the other pages. So you'll find that same number will be in there in the same way that it is for this example. It'll be the same thing broken down for the different administrative departments and research, et cetera. So every part of the university, you'll see what the equivalent is to, like to this figure here, that'll show up in each one of them, including the President's Office. The bottom line being is that budget letter shows every penny that's changed from year to year. So we felt that was the best way we could be transparent in terms of here's where we started, and here's where we ended, and this is every change that got us to last year to this year. So to the penny, each one of them is included in there.
That gives me a great opportunity, too, to thank a couple of people, one of whom is here and one of whom isn't, who do all the detail work, who do all the really precise work that winds up with reporting like this, and that's, of course, Lamont Stradesky in financial services and Brian Christie himself, and I want to thank them. We could not do it without them, and they're the ones who really know where those numbers are at any given time. So thank you. Anything else? Gee. We haven't got the audience wound up here, Dave.
Maybe we'll have to make cuts. That'll get them going.
If there are no further questions, we won't keep you. We would again like to thank you for coming today and thank everyone for their input throughout this lengthy budget process. Thanks so much.
And if anything does come up, feel free to fire us a question. We'd be glad to help answer rather than have rumors out there and things. And if you had any comments you could fire them to the budget or any one of us individually. Thank you.